The light in the restaurant was designed to flatter the wealthy. It was a soft golden glow that dripped from crystal chandeliers, polishing the gleam on the silverware and warming the deep crimson of the velvet booths, meant to make everything look expensive, flawless, and perfect. But this light was not kind to Clara. It caught the raised, silvered edges of the scars that climbed her right arm, from her knuckles to her elbow, turning them into a stark, jagged map of a past she never spoke of. She wore the long-sleeved uniform of a waitress, but the constant motion of serving, placing plates, refilling glasses, clearing tables meant the cuff would inevitably ride up, revealing the story she tried to keep hidden. Most patrons were polite enough to ignore it. A few would cast a quick, pitying glance before looking away.
Ow.
But the party in Booth 7 was different. They were loud, draped in the kind of casual luxury that screamed of old money and an unshakable sense of entitlement. The man at the head of the table, a portly figure named Mr. Sterling, had a voice that sliced through the restaurant's genteel. He had been complaining since he arrived. The temperature was too warm. The water was not chilled to his precise liking. And now his gaze had settled on Clara, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He watched her as she carefully poured wine. For his wife, his eyes fixated on the brief glimpse of scarred skin. "I must say," he announced to his companions, his voice carrying easily to the adjacent tables, "one expects a certain standard. Ambiance is everything, and this is rather off-putting." Woman with a face tight from judgment and surgery nodded in agreement, her gaze flicking to Clara's arm with open distaste. "It makes you wonder about the hygiene, doesn't it, darling?" she murmured, loud enough for Clara to hear. Clara's shoulders tightened for a fraction of a second, the only outward sign that the words had landed. She finished pouring the wine, her movements economical and precise. Her face remained a quiet, dignified mask. She did not look at them. She simply said, in a low, even voice, "Will there be anything else for now?" Mr. Sterling chuckled, a short barking sound. "No, for now. Your presence is quite enough." It was an insult wrapped in dismissal, a casual cruelty that was, for him, as natural as breathing. They thought they saw a broken, damaged woman. They had no idea they were in the presence of a hero, if you believe that true strength is forged. In fires most of us will never see, make sure you subscribe to our channel. The story of what happened next in that restaurant will remind you that the deepest scars often hide the greatest honor. Across the room, dining alone in a small, shadowed alcove, sat a man in his late 60s. He was dressed in a simple but well-tailored suit, his posture ramrod straight, his silver hair neatly combed. This was Colonel Reed, retired. He had chosen the restaurant for its quiet reputation, a place to enjoy a steak and a glass of bourbon in peace. But there was no peace tonight. They'd seen the Sterling party arrive, their arrogance preceding them like a foul odor. And he had seen the waitress, Clara. He saw the way she carried herself, with a stillness and economy of motion that was unnervingly familiar. He saw the scars, but unlike the others, he did not see ugliness. He saw a story. He watched as the torrent of veiled insults began, and he saw the way Clara absorbed them. Her silence, a shield far stronger than any angry retort could have been. A muscle in his jaw tightened. He knew bullies. He had faced them down on fields far more dangerous than this plushly carpeted dining room, and he recognized the look in Clara's eyes. It was not fear or shame. It was a profound, weary patience. The look of someone who had seen true ugliness and found the petty cruelty of men like Mr. Sterling to be nothing more than a faint, pathetic echo. The meal progressed, slow-motion disaster orchestrated by Mr. Sterling. Every dish was an opportunity for a new complaint. Every interaction a chance to belittle Clara further. He sent back his soup for being lukewarm. He declared the bread stale. Each time, Clara would simply nod, retrieve the offending item, and return with a replacement, her expression unchanging. Her quiet resilience seemed to infuriate him more than any argument could have. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to cry, to get angry, to give him a reason to have her fired. "Honestly," he said, pushing his plate of half-eaten steak away, "it's as if they hired just anyone off the street. No polish. No decorum." He looked directly at Clara. Tell me, what could possibly happen to a person to make them look like that? A bar fight. His friends tittered, enjoying the spectacle. The other diners in the restaurant shifted uncomfortably. Young couple on a first date fell into a stilted silence, their own happy bubble pierced by the relentless negativity. The manager, a man named Martin, whose spine seemed to be made of jelly, hovered nervously near the kitchen doors, wringing his hands, terrified of confronting a wealthy patron. Clara continued her work, clearing the plates with steady hands. As she reached across the table for an empty bread basket, her sleeve pulled back further than before, revealing not just the scarred tissue, but something else, just below her. Elbow, nestled amongst the damaged skin, was a patch of dark ink. It was a tattoo, partially obscured but definite. Colonel Reed leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. He couldn't quite make it out from this distance, but the shape was tantalizingly familiar. It triggered a memory, a sense of deep, instinctual recognition that sent a jolt through him. He saw it again in the way she pivoted on her heel, a movement that was all efficiency, no wasted energy. He saw it in the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, not as a waitress looking for empty glasses, but as a soldier assessing her environment. The pieces were beginning to connect in his mind, forming a picture so astonishing, so profoundly at odds with the scene playing out before him, that he felt a surge of protective anger. He placed his fork and knife down on his plate with a soft click. His meal was forgotten. He was no longer just an observer, he was a witness. And he was waiting for the final, unforgivable line to be crossed. That line was crossed when Mr. Sterling, in a fit of theatrical pique, accidentally knocked his heavy silver fork onto the floor. "Oh dear," he said with faux innocence. "Clumsy me." He stared at Clara, waiting. With a deep, internal sigh, she bent down to retrieve it. The movement was fluid, graceful, but it caused her sleeve to pull up all the way to her elbow, fully exposing the tattoo. In the golden light, the design was now unmistakable. It was a winged dagger, thrust through a shield, with a small, precise number beneath it. Mr. Sterling recoiled as if he'd been struck. "My God," he exclaimed, his voice dripping with venomous disgust. "It's even worse up close. What is that? Supposed to be? Are you in a gang?" He looked at his wife. "I've lost my appetite completely. This is unacceptable." The air in the restaurant grew thick and still. The last murmur of conversation died. Every patron, every staff member, was now frozen, their attention locked on the drama unfolding at booth 7. Clara remained crouched for a moment, the silver fork in her hand, her face finally showing a flicker of raw pain. The attack on her work was one thing. The attack on this symbol, this sacred piece of her past, was another. That was it. That was the moment. The sound of a chair scraping against the polished floor was like a gunshot in the silence. Colonel Reed stood up. He was not a large man, but he radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable authority that commanded the attention of the entire room. He placed his napkin neatly on his table and began to walk, not with anger, but with a slow, deliberate purpose. He did not look at the manager, who was now pale and sweating. He did not look at the other diners. His eyes were fixed on the two people at the center of the storm, the arrogant bully and the silent soldier. He walked past the Sterling booth and stopped directly beside Clara, who was just beginning to straighten up. He ignored Mr. Sterling completely, as if he were a piece of furniture. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried the weight of command, a tone that had sent men running into battle. "And it was gentle, soldier," he said, his eyes on her arm. The word hung in the air, electric and impossible. Clara looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. She saw the quiet respect in his gaze, a look she had not seen in years. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod towards her arm. "May I?" he asked softly. She hesitated for a second, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. With a tenderness that stunned the onlookers, she pushed her sleeve up further, revealing the tattoo in its entirety. Colonel Reed looked at the winged dagger, and the faded numeral, and his expression softened into one of profound sorrow and immense pride. He then turned his head slowly, and for the first time, fixed his steely gaze on Mr. Sterling. "You asked what happened to her," the colonel said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. You feel you have a right to know? So let me tell you. The colonel's voice filled the silent room, not with shouting, but with the quiet, chilling authority of absolute truth. That tattoo, he began, pointing a steady finger at Clara's arm, is the crest of the 75th Ranger Regiment. It's a mark, earned with blood, sweat, and a courage you couldn't begin to comprehend in 1,000 lifetimes. Mr. Sterling's smug expression began to dissolve, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. And these scars you find so unappetizing, the colonel continued, his voice laced with ice, were earned on a hot, dusty road in Kandahar province. They are the result of an IED, an improvised explosive device that ripped through her unit's convoy. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The other diners leaned in, captivated. Clara stood motionless, her eyes locked on the colonel as if he were pulling a story from her very soul that she had long buried. She was a combat medic, he said, his gaze sweeping over the Sterling party. When the bomb went off, chaos erupted. Fire, smoke, the screams of the wounded. Most people would run for cover. It's human nature. But she didn't. He looked back at Clara with a reverence that was palpable. She ran towards the fire. She ran. Towards the screaming, she pulled 2 men from a burning vehicle, shielding the second one from incoming fire with her own body. That is where most of these scars came from. Not a bar fight, not a lawnmower. From shrapnel, from fire, from saving lives while you were probably complaining that your champagne wasn't cold enough. A collective gasp went through the room. The wife of Mr. Sterling put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror, not at Clara, but at her husband. He had turned a ghastly shade of white, his bravado utterly stripped away, leaving only a pathetic, shrunken man in an expensive suit. He tried to speak, to stammer some kind of defense. I had no idea. I mean, how could I know? The colonel's eyes narrowed into slits of cold fury. No, he boomed, his voice finally rising. You had no idea, because you did not care to know. You looked, but you did not see. You saw a waitress, a servant, someone beneath you. You saw flaws on her skin and never once considered that they might be marks of honor. You saw weakness where there is a strength that could break you in half without lifting a finger. The colonel then reached into his own jacket and pulled out a small, worn leather wallet. From it, he produced a military ID card, holding it up. On it was his own picture, younger, in uniform, and beneath it, his name and rank, Colonel Thomas Reed. And then he pointed to a small, discreet pin on his lapel, a tiny metallic version of the exact same winged dagger on Clara's arm. That tattoo means she is a ranger. It is a symbol of the finest soldiers this country has to offer. It means she is family. My family, and you, sir, are not fit to breathe the same air as her. The humiliation was absolute, a crushing, silent weight. Without another word, Mr. Sterling stumbled out of the booth, his wife and friends following like a procession of shame, leaving their half-eaten, expensive meal behind. And then something extraordinary happened. A young man at a nearby table slowly got to his feet and began to applaud. Then his date joined him. Soon, the entire restaurant was on its feet, a wave of thunderous applause washing over Clara, a sound that was not pity, but pure, unadulterated respect and awe. The manager, Martin, rushed over, his face a mask of profound shame. Miss Sargent. I am so sorry. Clara finally moved. She looked from the manager to the colonel, and then at the still applauding patrons. A single tear traced a clean path through the dust of her composure. She gave a small, shaky smile. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but clear, echoing. The lesson of the evening, it's all right, she said. Some battles are just quieter than others. The colonel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your watch is over for tonight, soldier, he said warmly. Let someone else take care of you. In the golden light of the restaurant, the scars on her arm no longer looked like damage. They shone like medals.